Okay, so I'm here with Dr. Holly Barry, who has her PhD in experiential marketing. So our group self-selected into the future of marketing category, and after a brainstorming session, we came to the conclusion that everyday people are being tricked by quote unquote shady marketing tactics by businesses to either impulsively spend without realizing, and give away slash have information taken from them without realizing. So, Holly, why do you think this information is so valuable to businesses taking the information?
I think in business today, data is such a valuable asset, and I think the reason for that is we're trying to make it more informed decisions throughout marketing and any business department and different business activity. Because when you're talking about the return on different marketing approaches and different business approaches, it's really important to have that ROI then as well. So when you look at it from that perspective, it allows you to make more informed decisions, it allows you to back up information, allows you, I suppose, to speak to a board in a way that is very relatable and showing a return on stuff then as well. With that information being so valuable, I suppose it's I would say it's probably to a certain extent cheap market research. If you're looking at it from a perspective of social media and insights there as well, even if it is trackable advertising that way too, if you're trying to really look at consumer sentiment, it's really handy there. Traditionally, if you're looking at how marketing would have probably got this information, going back maybe 20 or 30 years ago, it really would have been focus groups and lots of research like that really is so expensive. So I think it's important to realize as well, like when we're talking about this, this information that consumers we're getting from consumers, there is a transaction, and we can discuss that in a little bit, but it's not that it's one way, it's two ways then as well.
So, when people give over the information, is their information always ending up with the people they give it to, or can it end up with other people?
I think it depends on what you're using. So let's just say, for example, if it's a Tesco club card, Tesco have a partnered research agency that they own called dunnhumby, and dunnhumby sell that data then as well. It depends on what it is. If it is, you're talking about data through subscription, or you're giving an email address, obviously that stays at a business for GDPR reasons. But I think the important part here is looking at the terms and conditions when you're giving this information, because it has to be stated there if it is being used by a company or if it's being sold on third party. I would say probably there's two ways of looking at this. I think personally, you have the part where, let's just say for a super value club card, where that is really them trying to drill into consumer behavior, see what consumers are looking for, is there any usage patterns, but they don't sell on that information then as well. But then the likes of Tesco, that's a very valuable and lucrative asset for them to have. And I suppose it's important to say too, if you're looking at the club card scenario, I know I'm focusing on this just for now, but that information is really important for suppliers as well as super value from that perspective too. I think that it's stuff that's not easily accessible information, but if you look at it from a data mining perspective, like a club card, it's really handy, and it's a very lucrative revenue source for a business if they have that they can offer to their suppliers then as well. Like at the end of the day, if you're talking about this data and I suppose making observations on it, it even is down to like EPOS, that it tell the electronic point of sale what people are buying at a given time. Technically that is information that you could count as what you say is shady. It's how you analyse it, and that's the important thing. It could be very useful to one business and absolutely nothing to another, and it just depends how savvy they are with data and technology.
So, what, in your opinion, is the overall goal of quote unquote shady activities such as bot followers of businesses?
So, bot followers, so I need to ask you a question before I go into this, if that's okay.
Yeah, perfect.
So, I'm not trying to catch you, I'm just trying to understand what you mean by this. So, there's probably two perspectives here. At the start, you were talking about, I suppose, a transaction of businesses getting information from people then as well, but they're not getting information with bot followers. It's probably more deceiving consumers. So which is the side that's important here?
I think we're mainly looking at just businesses not necessarily being totally upfront, like with bot followers, it's giving a false security to consumers.
Okay, I understand what you mean. So I'm going to throw a scenario at that then as well. So if you're saying that shady marketing will be seen as, let's just say that it's Sony having fake followers then as well, it can be in fake information from a consumer side if they give the wrong information. Just for example, if they're signing up for something and give a fake date of birth. So it goes two ways then as well. With the bot followers, I think it's a really interesting thing then for sure, because like I would say that although some businesses might find that being an important metric, the followers they have. In our business, that's a vanity metric and it's not important. And if you're looking at kind of like modern business and marketing tactics, that wouldn't be an important metric. You're really focusing more on impressions and the frequency of a post, and that's what's important there, and the sentiment built from that then as well. Bot followers, I completely agree. It's not the right practice. It's not good business practice at all, and there's no benefit to a business or a consumer with that. Especially when it's so transparent that you can go in and look at people's or businesses' followers and you know that it's fake straight away. And I think consumers are very savvy nowadays. They expect businesses to be transparent. They expect them to be reliable and consistent as well. And if anything, it I suppose creates a lack of credibility for a business. And God, anyone your age anyway, and even my age, I think it's something they're very aware of as well. They want a trusting relationship with the business, and something like that doesn't help.
Perfect. So what is the legality of falsely advertising a product / service or using an individual's info without that person knowing?
So without that person knowing, there's T's and C's involved in everything. So everyone knows they're signing up for it. So I disagree. Like in any business practice that's ethical, consumers know what there's, if they read the T's and C's, like they've ticked them, fair enough. But they should always know if they read the T's and C's. In common business practice, that would be very important, definitely, to make sure that people are aware of what they're signing up to at that. What was the first part of the question again?
So what is the legality of falsely advertising a product or service?
Okay, so when we're talking about legality, ASAI would be the governing framework, and that is, I suppose, from there's two perspectives here. They might look at, general advertising of product, and then alcohol advertising is a very different thing then as well. I would count them as two different things because it's so important to get them both right individually then too. There is absolute strictness when it comes to marketing, and everything really is looked at. From my perspective, I work in FMCG, so there's two kind of governing bodies we'd be looking at. You have the RORAI, and that basically is they look at mixed retailing to make sure that it's completely legally compliant with marketing as well. Product placements, how it's seen as well. So that would be like anything to do with their supermarkets or convenience stores. And then we'd also be monitored from an alcohol point of view. And there is a body called Copy Clear, and it's a charity organisation, technically not charity, but an organisation, I suppose, that works off donations from suppliers. And what they do is they monitor the legality of marketing from an alcohol perspective and make sure that people are abiding by it. So it just is a few examples of marketing legality then as well. There has to be a 30-day period where if you're paying a price, that way if you're putting it down, there has to be a 30-day period that the price was a certain price beforehand then as well. And this would be common knowledge, I would say, and that's outside of FMCG as well. Anyone working in marketing would have an idea of the AI framework then as well and know the requirements there. RORAI is a big thing there too. I know I mentioned that. With the legality of information then as well, GDPR plays a huge role here, and that's really important. It's when you're asking a consumer for information, it has to be legally obliging, and then as well we have to make sure that it's fair in the consumer, that they're completely understanding and that they're not being, I suppose, taken advantage of, or that it's not against their will. So GDPR play a huge role in marketing legality too, and that I know it's new in Europe, but it's strictly monitored as well. There is huge fines. There has been companies like Apple who've already suffered this too, and I think people are way more savvy with their information and their identities at the moment as well. So going back to the second part of that question again, although there's all these different ways of getting information and getting data from consumers, at the end of the day, people are aware what they sign up to, or at least they should be. So from a shady perspective, I'm not sure how shady it is when you sign up to T's and C's.
Okay. Do you know of any commonly used marketing tactics that might be considered by people as quote unquote shady that are legal?
That are legal?
Yeah.
So shady is a very broad term with that. If we're looking at club cards, you might say, oh, they're taking your information, but they're not. You signed up for as part of the T's and C's as a club card. Them selling it on to suppliers or third party, it's all stated there as well. People might feel that's shady, but it's not. The information that, social media sites like Facebook and Instagram, people might feel it's shady with the remarketing, but it's not then as well. Personally, I don't believe that it is. I always think the one that people are completely floored with is that they look something up on a certain website and then it's remarketed to them on Facebook or Instagram. They're absolutely floored by that, and they're so shocked and they can't understand how it is that it's following them around. But it really is something as simple as Facebook pixels, and that it really, they're tracking where the consumer goes the whole time. And tracking online is a very common thing, but something that people can be a little bit afraid of as well. When it comes to advertising then through Ads Manager, actually Snapchat are doing this really well too at the moment, where they have their own manager as well, where you can kind of get that information and use it. But let's stick with Facebook for the moment. So with Facebook Ads Manager, obviously you can I suppose target people by their demographic, by their sociographic, by their interests and stuff like that. People may think that's shady, but it's not, because this goes back to my point I was saying at the start, that it's a two-way kind of relationship. At the end of the day, people have signed up for a free service using Facebook and Instagram and different different social media platforms. But at the end of the day, if it's free, there has to be some sort of transaction, and that transaction nowadays is your data. And that's what you're technically paying with, is your data. So consumers, again, if they read the T's and C's, they'd be aware of that. But unless they want to pay for a site, there has to be some sort of stream, there has to be some benefit for the provider then as well. So there are things I think that people may think they're shady, but I personally don't.
Okay. What do you find to be the most effective way of identifying a target market, and what in your opinion is the best way of reaching out to your target market once identified?
So target markets is something that I find really interesting, because traditionally it is looked at by a sociographic and demographic perspective, but I personally think that's not the right way of doing it. And a book I know I've mentioned to you before, How Brands Grow, by Byron Sharp and the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, really do a great job at completely defiling this topic and making sure that it's very transparent and the right approach to it. So in Barry Group, we don't do traditional segmentation for target markets at all. We go a very different route, and we look at interests and common interests in multi-generational marketing. So we find that really important, firstly. Can you actually repeat that question for me again, so I know I'm getting the second part?
Yeah. So what do you find to be the most effective way to identify a target market, and what in your opinion is the best way of reaching out to the target market once identified?
Okay. So this is a question I actually really like. So identifying target markets, the way we do it is things called CEPs, and that means category entry points. And if we look at, I suppose, neurology and marketing then as well, what happens is you don't just think of a brand and say, I want to get that, or I want to have that today, or I want to go to that shop to buy this. That's not how it happens. There has to be something that's a related occurrence. So let's just say, for example, if I really, really want a takeaway, what's the first thing that'll come to mind? For you, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Probably pizza.
And if you were thinking of a brand to get that pizza?
Apache.
Apache. Okay. So there's lots of different reasons you could feel, oh, I really want Apache right now. It could be that you're starving. It could be that it's a certain thing on the menu that attracts you. So there's lots of different ways of looking from that perspective. So the way we identify target markets is by shared interests and through things we call memory structures. And memory structures are what comes to mind when you have to think of a product, and that brand comes to light then as well. So we identify target markets through common memory structures and CEPs. So I know it's not the traditional way of doing it, but that would be how we approach the topic then as well. So that works really well. If we're then targeting those categories of CEPs, we make sure it's through common occurrences. So that's the big thing for us, is it's always through common occurrences and that multi-generational approach. Because at the end of the day, if I tell you we're going to target college students, that could be an 18-year-old or a 65-year-old. And it's really important to have that shared ground then as well. So what we do is to, I suppose, target these different target markets. We firstly look at their media consumption and what relates to them then as well. Social media is always going to play a part here, and I think as social media has developed, what we've seen is there's probably different hubs for different age groups, which is really interesting then as well. I know you could probably say as well that doesn't take in, the elderly, but if you think of our grandmother, Jamie, she's on the RT player the whole time, so it's really easy to advertise even to her through VOD, video on demand advertising then as well, in the ads for there. So you can make sure that you can speak to these people by their interests. So if we were to talk about carry out off license, and I'm trying to target you in a certain group, and let's just say that it is, we're talking about a reason why people might come to carry out is for a Saturday night kind of relaxing thing, or maybe they're having a drink while watching sports, and that could be important there. So we will then have a look at your interests in sports, and we'll be able to target you through that. might be a few different ways. We like to do broad reaching media, which would be your digital, your out of home, your newspaper advertising, your TV advertising and VOD then as well. But then we'll also go more granular after that, and we will break it down a little bit more, and it's through experiences after that. And then after that, we'd retarget those experiences through social media and optimize the content then that little bit more as well. For me, experiences can be something absolutely huge, or we can break it down to a really granular level of actually in store, what's your experience and how can we capitalise on that bit further. So we target you through those few different elements, and we make sure then that we try to build that memory structure with you to come to carry out, and then retarget it to you again and again.
Lovely. Just a final question now. So what's your opinion on a concept where someone could be notified or educated about a transaction that they might regret that they're about to make? So say signing up to an email list to get a benefit of some sort, but they're notified then in the meantime saying you may regret this, or this is what's going on here.
So I would say the regret thing's a tricky thing, because that's an automatic bias. So what I think probably what you're talking about in a way is GDPR, where they say, have you consented here? Regret's a tricky word because you're automatically denoting that it's a negative effect, and we have to make sure consumers were always very neutral with that, but that we're not, I suppose, relaying your own opinion. At the end of the day, a brand isn't going to say you might regret this because they want you to do it then as well. So we need to give people an opportunity and very transparently do that 100%. But I feel that when it comes to signing up to things, GDPR regulations have done this really, really well. You have to accept everything. You can't go anywhere without accepting, and every time you go on the site, you have to re-accept it then as well. When you're talking about email marketing there as well, then you have to consent. You always have to consent, and there's always T's and C's. I think in a way, by the fact that you have to tick the box and say I've read the T's and C's, even though you mightn't have done it, it really is making it very clear to people that they have to do this. And if you decide to disregard that step and just tick the box, that's your own decision then as well. Now, I do it myself out of convenience as well, so I don't think there's any other way to make it any clearer. But I think that legality in Europe, and also through GDPR, but also brand, I suppose, I'm going to say brand responsibilities, they're very, very, I suppose, aware of that. Like even just for example, when you're talking about, I suppose, regret and brands being responsible, the likes of Nestle and Cadbury as well, Mondelez, they have a whole system where they won't advertise to under 12s. And all of their advertising, if it's actually to do to under 12s, it will be to a family unit. So I think brands are very aware of the role that they play in modern society. And they're very aware that they don't just want a consumer for a single transaction, they want it for life. So they value consumers, and they're very aware of all transactions and communications and touch points they have with them as well. And these are monitored massively. And even with brands or businesses that they partner with, they'd hold them to the same levels then as well. So I think businesses definitely are a lot more aware nowadays. I think that everyone's really bought into GDPR. I think that businesses are very aware of marketing legality then as well, and the governing bodies of how they have to respond and comply with them too. So I think that technically is being done, and in a very transparent way.
Okay, that was it. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.